Tom Cotton appearing on Fox News and talking about this. This is what Senator Cotton had to say when he was on Fox.
Well, Brian, first, I commend the president for recognizing that Antifa ought to be treated like a terror organization. There are a lot of tools that the president, the Department of Justice has in their toolkit, from the Insurrection Act to the Explosives Act to the Riot Act, that can be used to stop this anarchy. Let's be clear in the broader context here. The video of George Floyd's death is deeply disturbing. I welcome the quick action by local authorities and the Department of Justice to investigate, to get the facts, and to do justice for George Floyd in accordance with law. And we always respect the rights of peaceful protesters. But anarchy, rioting, and looting, we have zero tolerance for, and it needs to end tonight.
Senator Tom Cotton appearing there on Fox News with that. Senator, I want to get your position on that and what you've had to say about what's happening involving the riots and protests around the country.
Hey, Kevin, thanks for having me on. Well, as I said yesterday on Fox, the video of George Floyd's wrongful death is deeply disturbing, and I commend and welcome the quick action by the local authorities there and our Department of Justice to investigate the matter, get the facts quickly, and do justice for George Floyd according to law. And we respect the rights of peaceful protesters, but we have zero tolerance for anarchists, nihilists, insurgents, insurrectionists, rioters, and looters. It is past time to have an overwhelming display of force on the streets of our cities to put an end to this insurrection. And if local law enforcement is overwhelmed, if they don't have the numbers to match the threat, then the National Guard and ultimately the active duty military needs to be called forth to put an end to this violence.
Senator, you talked about that, the military, and one of the quotes you have, whatever it takes to restore order, no quarter for insurrectionists, anarchists, rioters, and looters. In the military term, using the phrase no quarter means not taken prisoner but killed. Now, explain that and how you mean that. I think we can all agree with. I think we can all agree that
in the dictionary term, if you look it up in the dictionary, it literally says, in its colloquial sense, is no mercy, being unkind, treating harshly. And I could give you a long list of Democratic politicians and liberal media pundits using it exact that way. So I am not going to apologize for the professional umbrage takers on left-wing social media who are apologizing for anarchists and insurrectionists. There should be no slack given at all to these insurrectionists and these anarchists. There should be mass arrests of people who are violating curfews, who are attacking police, who are damaging property and stealing property. Yeah. And if our local police are overwhelmed by the numbers and they need backup, our National Guard needs to be mobilized, and if our National Guard needs support, our active duty military needs to be called forth in whatever numbers it takes.
It's Senator Tom Cotton at News Radio 102.9 KRM. When you talk about no quarter, you are using the dictionary version, and I'm asking because you have a military background.
Yes, of course, Kevin. And the whole point of an overwhelming display of force, as we saw in Washington, D.C. last night, is so you don't have to have a use of force. The only way to stop these rioters and looters is to have force in such numbers between local law enforcement and, if necessary, the National Guard and the active duty military, that the rioters and the looters stand down.
Senator Tom Cotton, multiple Republican senators have been critical of the president's tweets and his rhetoric about this, including the majority whip in the Senate. What's your take on what the president has had to say about this?
Well, I thought the president's remarks in the Rose Garden yesterday were perfectly appropriate. They echoed his remarks at the launch in Florida on Saturday. Now, the launch itself somewhat overshadowed them, but he made the point that the video of George Floyd's death is deeply disturbing, and justice should be done for George Floyd and his family, and that we respect the rights of protesters, but we cannot have this kind of violence and anarchy in our streets.
Senator Tom Cotton, what about the discussion? What about opening a discussion with the people that are concerned about racism in America? And I think we can all agree that rioting and looting is not something that needs to happen. But what about the discussion? Where does that come from you as a senator from Arkansas and in an area where this is taking place, and also from the leadership of our country? When does that discussion and that happen?
That discussion cannot happen in the middle of mob violence on our streets all around America. We have to restore order. The only the only way we can move forward is restoring order on our streets. Just look at what happened last night, Kevin. You have police officers and U.S. Marshals being shot dead in the streets of our cities. Mm-hmm. Once order is restored, in accordance with the rule of law, then we can have justice for George Floyd. We cannot have mob rule in this country.
Senator Tom Cotton, you also talked about Antifa or Antifa, however you want to say it with that. Is that an organization or an idea? Can you give some insight on that?
So it is a loose network cell-based organization akin to the kind of cellular-based networks you have with Al-Qaeda or other terrorist organizations. There's not a single head somewhere directing all this, but there are clear connections in cities where these protesters have been more active, and sometimes going back 20 years to places like Seattle, and you've even seen it on the streets in Little Rock, with flyers posted on telephone poles to encourage people to take action against the police, and they'll get paid off. But there's no doubt that these left-wing nihilists and anarchists are trying to co-opt what were peaceful protests, agitate them, and turn them into mob violence.
Senator, I'm seeing reports that it's not just left-wing agitators, it's also far right-wing white supremacist types that are trying to be involved in this. I have something that I've gotten from Twitter on my page, or not on my page, but I looked at last night, that talked about something happening at Park Plaza Mall. Is it on both sides? Is it far left, far right? And is it political? Is it just anarchy on either side, the mentality of it?
So Kevin, I haven't seen that evidence. I have spoken with senior officials in the Department of Justice who have told me they only have seen evidence that it's Antifa who's behind many of these steps. Like, bricks don't just show up in the middle of the street by themselves. They're placed there. Mm-hmm. However, if there are right-wing extremists involved in this at all, they should be treated in the exact same way. Whether they're black or white, man or woman, young or old, there can be no tolerance whatsoever for the kind of mob violence we're seeing on our streets.
Senator Tom Cotton, good to have you on this morning. Thanks so much.
Thank you.